Always wondered what Madonna felt like with one of these things, but we'll give it a go. A bit weird. Just like to start by thanking the committee for inviting me to talk. People who know me know that I love to talk, tell a few stories. And I've been very privileged in my life to have now worked 28 years in athletics and worked with some really cool top athletes. So this is more about a story of my development working with athletes and my thought processes and how to support them. Now, I've no conflicts of interest. So we're going to look at performance levels of elite jumpers, what we can expect this year in Doha. We're going to look at the technical parts of jumping, mainly long triple and high jumps. I don't know too much about pole vault, a bit too complex for me, that. And then what I'm going to try and do is link the technical side with the other aspects of performance, which I think all biomechanists should do. We're all too good at telling the coach what he already knows, and it's about finding those gaps of how to link with the S&C coaches and the physios to make them perform better. So bringing in the physical attributes which allow them to do the technical performance. So it's linking the cause with the effect, and I don't think there are too many biomechanists with that outlook around the world. We just tell people what they already know, bring them into the lab. Aren't we wonderful? We've got a Vicom, we can make things and animations and what have you. But this is not what this is about. Okay, would you believe that this performance here was 24 years ago? The world record set by Jonathan Edwards. And I was fortunate enough to be working with Jonathan in my early days at that point, a few years into that. That's 24 years ago. But if we look at the progressions of world records, that is actually, apart from the women's high jump, it is actually the youngest world record. Everything else has been like 30 years plus ago in the men and women's long jump. Now looking at those trajectories there, we should be looking at, where's this laser pointer? We should be, right by now, around about 2020, we should be looking at long jumps way over 9 meters, way over 8 meters for women's long jump, women's triple jump, way over what, 1550, which is about right actually. That's the newest event. It only started in, women's triple jump was quite new into the athletics events in '91. Triple jump, we should be over 19 meters, and we're not. So you see, it's plateaued, and it doesn't look like most of them are going to be broken anytime soon. Maybe apart from the men's triple jump, where you've got Christian Taylor, who's done a performance of 18:21, which is only a few centimeters away from the world record. A couple of triple jumpers from South Africa and Cuba, long jumpers, sorry, that might get close again. Okay. So, what sort of performance would win a medal this year in Doha? The best performance that's won a bronze medal from 2007 to 2017, looking at previous Olympics and World Championships, 8:37 for a long jump, 17:59 for a bronze in the triple jump, and 2:38 for bronze. That should almost guarantee a medal. But if you look at the least performance, 8:12 might do it in the long jump, 17:33 triple, 2:29 could be within a shot on a good day. For women, we're looking at 7 meters 8, or if you're lucky, 76, 15:23 for triple jump, or 14:58, somewhere between those, and 2:03 to 1:97, which is a bit closer for the women's high jump. Now, let's focus on long and triple jump, and this is where we would start our provision of support, is looking at the relationship between the approach speed and the distance that they've jumped. And you see the strong correlations there between how fast they run on the runway and how far they jump. But it's not always the case. When you get into that high end of performance, it's not always the fastest performance that creates the longest jump. It's how you utilize that speed is more important. And we'll talk about that and the link to physical attributes later. So we use a speed gun. It's a Laveg gun. We position it at the end of the sand pit. And this builds up an instantaneous velocity profile of the jumper. This is here is the board. 0 is the board. This is where they start the run up. And this data here from the Commonwealth Games in 2002. You can see that Jonathan Edwards in the red jumped 1786 to win. Adawu was second, 1768. Edwards had the highest peak speed, but at 1 meter from the board, they were both at the same velocity. What we would do typically is look at the average speed from 11 to 6 and 6 to 1 and plot that against the effective distance they jumped. This is data from last year's Diamond League, 12 months ago. This is a guy called Max Heb, who plotted his graph here of speed against distance. This is the line here that we would expect. If you run at 10 meters per second, you should jump round about 1650. This guy doesn't quite reach that expected distance, and this is maybe why. Because we've got the hop, the step, and the jump phase distances here. These graphs are made up of a few thousand data points that we've collected ourselves, not anything from the literature, it's all from our own work. So you see that there's a massive imbalance here between his step distance. His hop is there or thereabouts, his step is way down. So there's something wrong with the hop landing into the step, but he manages to pull something back in the jump, which is way beyond what you'd expect. He's achieved that distance of, what was it, 1666, but the distribution of that effort hasn't been great. We'll look at one of the guys who could actually break the world record. He's jumping effectively around about 18 meters. His speed is way above that line, so he's utilizing his speed very well. But if he's going to improve further, he needs to take his speed further. He needs to improve his speed. We'll look at his distributions here of his best performances. They're pretty much bang on what you'd expect. But then we've got Christian Taylor. Said before, he's jumped 1821 in his best performance ever. He's the second longest performance legally ever. And what we've got here is the phase distances expressed as a percentage. And what we see is that his performance is made up of either a balanced technique or a jump-dominated technique. When you get to that higher level performance, you can alternate how you utilize your longest phase. And at that level, sometimes it's better to put more emphasis on the jump than it is on the hop. So you carry your speed through rather than put it all out in a hop. I worked with one jumper in Britain who was desperate to put a 7-meter hop in, and it just killed the rest of his performance. But when he reduced it to about 650, he got the standard to go to the Olympics in 2008. So you see here, Christian is jump dominant, so we've alternated where his hop and his step, his hop and his jump are, and his step is bang on mark as well. Good speed utilization, just a little bit above what you'd expect. Jump dominated technique, but it needs to develop his hop and jumps further to improve. We've modeled that, and I'll show you in a bit. So what is the mechanics of jumping? It's governed by projectiles, which makes it quite easy. So the distance or the height in a high jump are dependent on horizontal and vertical velocities, which dictate the ultimate speed and projection angle at the point of takeoff. And the technique of jumping is about sacrificing horizontal speed you gain in the approach into vertical speed on each takeoff. And there's three main characteristics that allow you to do that, dictated by the leg placement angle, the trunk inclination, angle at touchdown, and how much flexion goes on in the knee. So if we look at these positions, and please remember these, because in a high jump, the need to go more vertical is more paramount. So you position your center of mass further behind the point of support, typically 40 degrees between ankle to center of mass, in this angle here, and 20 degrees rear trunk inclination. In a long jump, you don't need to get quite as much vertical speed, so your leg is planted a bit closer, at 30 and 10 degrees trunk. But in a hop takeoff, it's a bit closer again. Hop, you're trying to maintain some horizontal speed, not go all out for a big long hop. So these are quite critical positions that we focus on in the feedback we give to our athletes. The mechanisms that take place is that you plant the leg, your knee flexes, the spring is activated, and we can separate into compression and extension phases by the point here of maximum knee flexion. So the force of the contact causes the knee to flex, and you'd also work in a pulley. So your hip extensors are trying to pull your body over your foot. Now you can see that even though the knee flexes, your center of mass still rises. And this is what we refer to as the pivoting mechanism. So in this phase, the first part of the takeoff is governed by the pivot or the pull using your glutes. It's about not flexing too much, so it's eccentric quadriceps. You've also got this swinging movement of the free leg, which add to the loading through that support leg. And then in the extension phase, it's more concentric mechanisms, the recoil of that spring through the tendons, and then the free limbs continue in their upward trajectory to raise the height of the center of mass too. So these are the key positions that we would look at to give feedback on. The other thing we've got is a blocking placement or an active placement. So if you want to get more of an impact force, an impulse from the initial contact, the leg would just translate forward and block. But if you want to reduce some of the loss in horizontal speed, you do an active placement when it comes back relative to the body. Okay, so those are the things that are referred to in the literature as well by James Hay, blocking placements or active placements. Now, how can Christian Taylor break the world record? I was fortunate to have a former colleague, a guy that I used to work with who works with Christian Taylor. And he gave us this video of his hop, step and jump in training of a decent 15-meter jump. And what we did, we took the positions here of the trunk and each leg and put them into a model. So all we did, we looked at the angles of the body segments. We know his height and we know the length of each segment. And knowing what he did in the Diamond League, jumping 1792 effectively, we put those angles in, we looked at the time of flight, the contact times, and this gave us a typical phase distribution of being jump dominated or balanced. That's the way he prefers to jump. Now if he wants to break the world record, just manipulating this, he can actually break the world record doing 1831, theoretically, by increasing his speed by 0.3 meters per second. That would give him a hop distance of 624, which is what we would want to get that phase ratio. The benefit of going faster here would mean that he would have less vertical impact forces at contact here, which makes it better for him because he's not got the same level of stress. He would get a decent 5 meter 32 step and he would carry that through to a 675 jump, which would equate to an 1831 new world record. So by taking his approach speed from 10.5 meters per second up to 10.8 might be the way forward for Christian. If we look at our own Mutaz Barshim, very, very close to a world record. We used a similar approach here, putting his body dimensions in, putting the positions of the athlete in at the takeoff. He needs to raise his mass, center of mass, by 1.03 meter, if that is his typical takeoff position. In order to do that, it would mean generating an average vertical force of nearly 3.5 body weights. Okay. So this is a typical vertical ground reaction force. What you've got is a passive phase, which is an impact, a trough, and then an active eccentric and a concentric phase. There's a lot of talk around impact forces, and in triple jump, in the step and jump takeoffs, people are talking 22 times body weight. Now that is sensationalized at times, because I could reduce that to about 15 through the choice of smoothing that I would use on that data. But nevertheless, it is high. Now, if I was to improve my average vertical force, I would typically want to run faster and block harder. So I could put my leg out further and I run faster. That would increase this impact force. But the knock-on effect is that this trough might drop, and I might not be able to recover it because I don't have the strength and control to get out of it, which would prolong my contact time. Okay, so through training, what I need to do is raise that further by getting used to those positions, to arrest my movement and downward motion quicker, establish this control and generate more active force through eccentric and concentric mechanisms, and to bring my contact time back into line. Okay, and that raises my average vertical force at contact. So the conditioning side of it is coming in here. This is what we're trying to work with a high jumper. Now there is a risk. This is Cervantes Stringfellow, former world champion indoors. He's jumped 852. This is his first round jump. He does about 780 or something there. There's a bit of a giveaway what's coming. This is round 2. Okay, he lay in the sand for about 3 minutes whilst the medics came for him. February 2006 this happened. This is what I've taken off a website. Snapped his patella tendon, ruptured patella tendon, but in 2004, 2 years earlier, he snapped his Achilles. So building on what Jill was talking about yesterday and early this morning, it's not just about rehabbing an injury, it's not looking forward 18 months, 2 years ahead, as if that loading is going to be distributed to another part. And it's not just one occurrence. This is Asher Hansen, British triple jumper, 2004. 2 years before she ruptured her patella tendon, she had Achilles problems. Okay, so this is referral, it's compensation, and it's things that we should be mindful of. But it doesn't just happen to established athletes who've won medals on the world stage. This is a young British triple jumper who missed going to the World Juniors because he ruptured his patella tendon in the triple jump. Also had Achilles problems. So this jumping is seriously harmful if you don't get it right. So mentioned about the ground reaction forces. 22 body weight someone published, and I think people like to sensationalize these things. It is high, but in some of the events, you need to get high impact forces to utilize them to get the impulse, to get the height and the velocity. So it's not about the magnitude always, it's about how you control it, not compromising those key positions I mentioned before, manage how often the athlete experiences those loads, and adopt a variety of exercises to promote different aspects of jump-specific conditioning. Now, I like this one because this is IKEA. My wife makes me go to IKEA many times, but when I see this, it excites me. It's something mechanical, and this is showing the number of compressions that this seat is going through, a loading cycle of somewhere around, 7.5 million compressions. And as you're bored walking through IKEA, it just makes me think, is this similar to a jumper who's just constantly experiencing those compressions? Now, like the seat, which may break under a heavy load here, this is cycles to failure. Now, what we're looking for is in jumping is to manage risk. We could get damage through high impact forces, but it's unlikely. The body, I think, is quite robust. It's more likely to be affected by the number of occurrences of experiencing high impact forces, which may relate to heel pain, shin splints, lower back problems. But in the tendon, it's more about number of repetitions and it becoming more of a chronic problem. So what we've done, working with the coach, we tried to look into the different aspects of what is plyometric intensity. And this was an exercise in engaging a coach into discussion around his program. This is not hard and fast research, it's about looking at the different aspects of plyometric drills. We have, I think, almost 30 different plyometric drills that the jumps coach use, and they can characterize them in very different ways. So this took maybe a year to come up with, and it was more of a conceptual framework than anything else. So we're looking at aspects of difficulty, which is complexity in the legs and arms, number of consecutive contacts, the contact time, the horizontal speed that goes into it, the training phase that they're in, because there's some mental element to that, the inclination of the track, and the intensity factors being surface and footwear, approach length, impact severity, drop heights, double or single leg, leg plant angle, and foot contact. So we're trying to build up a profile of what each of these drills look like. If you land on the forefoot, you're pushing more force, which is not necessarily great for getting the reaction from the ground. And we classified all these jumps, all these different types of plyometric drill. See there's quite a lot. We graded them in terms of the difficulty and their intensity, and we multiplied them together to get an overall load coefficient. This is how it looked retrospectively over the course of a year. We've got the overall load here, which is the multiplication of the two for right leg and left leg, because not everything is done on one leg. There's a preference for the jumping leg. And this is the intensity and difficulty. Overall, that athlete did nearly 6,000 contacts, and the majority of them were based on a moderately high level of plyometric load. Now, this isn't published, no intention of ever publishing it. It's a conceptual thing that engaged the coach into a process of getting on the same wavelength. And it served purpose doing that. I think, in addition to that, the work that Jaime did, looking at the POMs and elements of fatigue and readiness to train from a questionnaire point of view, probably was more beneficial than what we did there. New technologies, we have something called the load sol, which measures the force in an in-shoe force measuring system, and this is the same drill on using the XN system to look at the joint movements. So this is multiple hops. You can see that it walks into it, and so you'll walk into it, and then it'll go onto one leg and do 5 hops. Okay, and this is the center of mass that we see in here. So this is a live feedback thing that we've got, which is great, and we've got the potential to look at impact forces, but if we were to spread these out a little bit, we'd see the active part of the exercise as well. So it's not all about the impact, it's about how you respond to that and generate the load as well. Okay, so linking now with the S&C coaches, the framework is that the performance is made up of speed, technique and control. And for control, we need to make sure that there's good force acceptance through proprioception, eccentric strength, and some level of stiffness. We need elasticity or plyometric strength, reactivity, whatever you want to refer to it as. And then the ability to generate force from concentric and isometric points of view. And it's getting that balance here to make sure that we can utilize the speed well on at the takeoff. Control issues, let's quickly look at this. So this is the XNs again in a high jump, which is again great for visualization. Okay. If we look at the high jump and the leg plant, this is the point where the athlete makes contact in the takeoff, and look what happens to the ankle, how much it rocks over there. Go back. So we've got some concerns there over the ankle and injuries there. If we look at what happens in a triple jump landing, you see the compression. This was used to try and work with a podiatrist to build some orthotics that would be suitable for a jumper. Okay. And then we managed to get some super high-speed film at 1,000 frames a second, and just look at the attenuation of this force through the heel. See how it's riding up through the quads there. And I think it's important to emphasize that heel contacts are important. If you try and encourage an athlete to put the full foot down or go on the toes, you're going to kill their performance. So that block or the active placement is important. This is the point in the middle of the takeoff. The ground reaction force will go up, and it's slightly to the right of the center of mass. And that leads to a drop in the right hip. So a strength around the hip is important, not to spend too much time on the ground and react quicker. Look at this one. How do we progressively build up this ability to establish a firm base of support? Here we've got a force platform, and we're looking at the time to stabilization. So now he's moved a little bit further away from the same height, and he can just nail that contact. He's going a bit higher now, and just look at how well he can establish that firm base of support. Okay, so he's going higher and further away. We then did a more dynamic thing where he would land and take off, and we related that to eccentric strength of hamstrings and quads, and found strong correlations there between eccentric quads and hamstring strength with vertical stiffness and jump distance from the takeoff. Definitely in the dominant leg, but not so much in the hamstrings in the non-dominant. Certain things we're looking into to promote some tendon health. Marco has got the thermal imaging camera that he's been trained on. Also uses at weekend to find where hot pipes are on the wall, so when you put in the shelves that you bought from IKEA, you don't burst them. You can contact him for that service. This is ultrasound tissue characterization that Carla, the physio in Aspetar, has been helping us with a specific case with a young jumper who'd had Osgood splatters leading into some patella tendonitis. The Spanish squat, Danny the physio was showing that earlier on, and just by a bit of modelling we can change the position of the athlete here and work out how that changed the knee moment either in double leg or single leg movements, and we can get up to around about 400 Newton meters around the knee joint going into single leg and almost becoming horizontal. Strength assessment. This is a young PGS, about 20 odd years ago. This is the first athlete that jumped over 14 meters in Britain. The differentiator between performance levels of jumpers we found was eccentric strength of quads, which was anyone that jumped over, resisted over 5.5 body weights, they were seriously good international athletes. So it's a good, safe way of measuring eccentric strength. When we moved away from a university base providing support, we went to high performance centres which didn't have the Biodex, the Kincom, the Lido, so we adopted an isometric squat, which we use now profiling our athletes. So this is to try and replicate this position here midway through a takeoff. Now we've profiled a number of athletes across the UK at various squad weekends that we did over a 5-year period, which amassed 37 males and 38 females, all part of the national squad, all competent jumpers, including Olympic medalists and world champions. Putting all that together, we did a profile on speed, strength, using the ISO squat, power in squat, jump, counter and drop jumps, reactive index, but also putting it into something more tangible, into a horizontal performance as well. So standing long jumps and 5 bounds, 5 hops. Now just to wrap it all up, we said before that someone who's going to get a medal in Doha in triple jump would need somewhere around 15.5 meters. This profile here is based on the norms from the British males who jumped a PB, or in this particular thing, he won the silver medal at the Europeans, 1764 being the performance, and you can see that the majority of these markers are above average. So although there was no correlations done between jump distance and these physical attributes, you can see that the better athletes would perform better across all these different aspects of physical attributes that we tested. We've got data norms for Asian juniors, Asian male and female, and British senior male and female as well. So this allows us to look at, if we want to perform well at an Asian level or world junior level, these are going to be quite good. But if we're looking at that transition into senior athlete, we've got a different set of norms here that we can find some deficits in. And that concludes my talk. Thank you.